It's 13 years since Labour swept to power with the phrase education, education, education. But have they done enough for schools to win your vote this time? Welcome to Election 2010, Testing the Parties. Hello and welcome to the programme. We've brought together a panel of teachers, school staff and parents to grill representatives of the three main parties to get to the facts behind the promises. In the hot seat is Schools Minister Vernon Coker. He'll be facing our panel of school staff. Let me introduce them. Catherine Myers is the Royal Air Force Head Teacher of the Year in a secondary school in London. She's Executive Head of Bishop Challoner Catholic Collegiate School, Britain's first federated school. Steve Mills won Primary Teacher of the Year at the Teaching Awards 2009. He works at the William Ransom Primary School in Hertfordshire. Teaching assistant Trish Gribble is Deputy Director of the Sixth Form at Stoke Damerel College in Plymouth and is the TDA's Teaching Assistant of the Year. And Chair of Governors Spiros Ilya was awarded DCSF Governor of the Year for his work at Bryndish and Hither Green Primary Schools. He's also a professional tutor for Teach First. Welcome to you all and to Vernon Coker. Before we take the first question, let's have a look at Labour's recent education pledges. This was Gordon Brown speaking at Woodbury Downs School in Hackney in February.
We will open up our school system to a new generation of school providers. We will bring into the heart of our education service organisations with the potential to become recognised and trusted brands that parents can be confident will have the world-class excellence and passion to improve their children's education. For just as we do not tolerate failure, so no longer can we tolerate schools that settle for just doing enough to get above the minimum standards. If parents are dissatisfied with a school, they will have a new right to initiate change in the leadership of that school. Where a significant group of parents say they are dissatisfied with their school leadership, the local authority will have to ballot all parents of that school on whether they want to bring in one of the newly accredited, proven and trusted school providers. Great teaching, personalised education, an insatiable desire to continually drive up standards, far more control for parents. These are the characteristics of the greatest schools. They will become the characteristics of every primary and secondary school in our country.
The Prime Minister there offering power to parents to change the leadership of failing schools to drive up standards. Vernon Coker, before we go to our questions from the panel, we heard something slightly newish there on parent powers, but on the whole, it looks a bit like, is it more of the same? Are you going to really be fighting on your record, or are we going to have some new policies, do you think?
Well, I think, first of all, any government has to be proud of what it's achieved. But, of course, it's not what we've achieved. It's what we've done working with governors, with teachers, with head teachers, with parents, and all of the staff who work in a school. It's their record that we're proud of. But, of course, you don't necessarily win elections on what you've done, although you can lose them on not having done as much as you should have done. So it's about our record, where we've had the level of investment we had, and we've seen the improvements. And then it's about where we go to in the future and how we drive on that school improvement that we've seen on over the last 13 years.
In the current financial climate, can you carry on affording to do what you've done in the past? Because you've said only a 0.7% real terms increase for schools and cuts elsewhere in the education budget.
Well, what we said was we'll have a 0.7% real terms increase for school budgets, and I think that's important. Of course, that's the whole DCSF budget. There will have to be changes with respect to that. But the commitment has been for the front line, for the delivery in schools, for the improvements that we've seen. Resources will be made available. And of course, it'll be tighter than it's been at the present time. People wouldn't believe me if I said anything else. But at the end of the day, that commitment to a 0.7% real terms increase for the front line.
OK, let's go to our panel. Catherine Myers.
Vernon, the Labour Party has begun to kite mark organisations, including universities. Gordon Brown has spoken about bringing in different organisations, and my school was a pioneer in this. We're the first federated school. And my question is, the essential factors for making a school successful, or a successful institution taking over an unsuccessful school, Are you bringing high expectation, professional staff, and the school begins to trust that you know what you're doing? What criteria are you going to use to kite mark organisations that take over struggling or failed schools?
Well, exactly, the kite mark that you've talked about, the criteria for that kite mark will actually be the very things that you've said. We know, looking at where successful head teachers have worked with other schools, they've brought about improvement to those other schools. Some schools have done it through federation, others have done it in other forms of collaboration through National Challenge Trusts or other examples. But the important thing is, you're absolutely right to say, what are the ingredients that actually make a successful school? And you're absolutely right to say it's leadership, it's the ethos, it's the quality of teaching, the support from the community, and involvement of all of the staff at that school, not just the teaching staff, but the non-teaching staff as well.
Are you happy with that list?
No, but what's the process that you're going to use to kite mark? For example, if I want outstanding in Ofsted, I know what to achieve, and if I want to raise standards in science, I know what to do to achieve it. So what is it that you're...
For the new providers,
for the
you're
new
talking about,
providers,
We've got an
what
accredit-
criteria, what do you actually need to do to get that kite mark?
As I say, the criteria will be laid out, much as you've said, and then there'll be an accreditation process through which people will go. If it's a collaboration that we would expect between two schools, that will be what we call accredited school providers. And then if it's beyond that, if it's a group of schools, then we'll have accredited school groups. But the whole fundamental point of that is that will be something which will try to drive improvement through the very criteria that I've laid out there. That obviously we want that good leadership, that ethos to be spread around the school system. So that accreditation process will then allow people to know that group or that provider actually is able to provide that sort of leadership to other schools where it's appropriate.
Okay, Steve, I do need to move on there, Steve.
Yeah.
As a member of the NHT, I'm about to be balloted on whether to take industrial action over this year's Key Stage 2 SATs. If head teachers and other senior leaders in schools decide to disrupt the administration of this year's test, what plans are in place to deal with that?
Well, the planning that we're doing, Steve, is to try to prevent that happening in the first place. We know, obviously, that the NHT are due to ballot in the next few days. We're working very hard with the NHT, discussing with them what the future could look like. It's obviously difficult with respect to 2010, although we've made important changes. Teacher assessment will be published alongside the maths and English results, and obviously this year there's not the science tests as well. So what we're trying to do is to work with the NHT to say to them, look, we are making changes. It's difficult, and we can't make the changes for 2010 that would totally satisfy the NHT. But we've just written, the Secretary of State and myself, to all of the primary school heads with a letter which is about the future, where we're looking towards things like the report card, which will assess more than just academic achievement.
For this year, you're going to go ahead, whatever NUT and NEHT decide. You're going ahead, in a word.
We've said that we've made changes to the 2010 arrangements, but the government's policy is to go ahead with the 2010
Steve,
arrangements.
You sort of say it's kind of too late maybe to do anything this year, but the rumblings and the goings on have been, for some time now, haven't they? So things could have been done earlier. Well,
we've tried to. I mean, obviously, these are, there's a lot of negotiation takes place. There's a lot of discussion that take place. We continue with those discussions. We've not shut any of that down, and to be fair, neither has the NAHT. So those discussions continue. There have been points of difference between us, but we're trying to narrow those points of difference. And as I say, it's difficult for 2010, but looking beyond, there's hope on the horizon, I think.
Okay, moving on, Trish.
Yes. Do you think the education system can really provide enough opportunities for all young people up to the age of 18? Or do you think it's just to keep them off the unemployment register?
You're talking about the raising of the education leaving age. Yes, what are they going to do?
I just think this is such a fantastic reform. I mean, let me first of all say that when we're talking about the raising of the participation age, sometimes that's caricatured as though we're trying to chain people to the desks. We're going to try and keep 16 and 17-year-olds who are reluctant to stay in school, that we're going to keep them there. But what it's about is saying, surely in the 21st century, we should be saying to our 16 and 17-year-olds, look, stay at school. If that's not appropriate, let's put you into, or get you into work with training, or get you into a college place or an apprenticeship. And so we think that's important rather than somebody at 16 coming to the end, they're leaving school and going either not working or going into something where there's not that level of training.
Do you need to know more about what options will be available for young people at 16?
I think that's my main concern, and there are those students who don't feel they want to stay in a school setting. They want to be more independent and go out and to be able to work.
And that's absolutely right. And we wouldn't want them to stay in a school setting in those circumstances. What we'd want them to be able to do is to get that learning experience in a work environment through an apprenticeship or other work-based activity. But what it is saying is that we think it important that 16 and 17-year-olds receive not only education but the training that's appropriate to them as well. So that gives them greater opportunity as they move forward in their lives.
Okay, Spiros.
Ever since the national curriculum was created, and especially since 1997, education change has come across thick and fast, and to such an extent there's never enough time to evaluate it. As a consequence, that's represented, poor value for money. It's also had negative impact on staff well-being and often on the education of the child. How are you not going to repeat this cycle again?
Well, I think, first of all, sometimes the initiatives are there because you're trying to drive forward change and you're impatient as teachers and head teachers and governors are as well. So we need to be careful that we don't overload the system. But I think if you look at what we've done, and that's what I was trying to say at the beginning about the education record that we've got, I think much of what has happened has led to significant improvement. I think the initiatives to have more teachers and the particular initiative around workload, where we've seen a big increase in the numbers of teaching assistants, I think that's been a great
we have had a schools
reform.
bill almost every year, haven't we? Do we still need so much legislation? I mean, that's Spiros' point, isn't it? Why not leave it time to evaluate it before having a next set of reforms?
Well, I think there's always a tension between where you are and where you want to be. I mean, if you look at the schools bill, for example, that's currently before Parliament, huge support within that for the primary school curriculum changes, for the personal and social education changes.
I don't dispute any of what you're saying. All I'm simply saying is that in order to actually make sure something's going to work, you need to evaluate it. Yeah. And usually that cycle is about 18 months, implementation, evaluation, to see if it's actually worked. And that really means in the lifetime of a parliament, that's about 3 or 4 major changes maximum.
Can you
in order to make sure you have value for money and it's actually working.
Value for money is crucial. Spiros is absolutely right. And alongside that, we do often set in place reviews, which we then try and respond to. And the Rose Review with respect to the primary school curriculum is one example of that. But evidence-based reform is important. I accept that.
OK, thank you very much. We'll come back to the panel for some more questions in a moment. But we have also been asking for your questions on Twitter. And here's one from Nicola Arnold. She asks, the Labour government introduced citizenship into the curriculum, but how important do you think it is? And does it really deserve its own lessons, citizenship?
I think citizenship is hugely important. I think, and look, it's not only through the lesson, but when I go to schools, and I'm sure the panel here and people watching this will know as well as me, I think the citizenship that's done in schools, not just through the lessons, but through the extracurricular activities, I think is phenomenal. The school council work, you see very young children as part of their school council discussing what should happen in the school. They make up the school rules, but they suggest the school rules and they argue and discuss.
Wouldn't it be better for the schools to decide? I mean, the trouble is, whenever there's a fad in government, whether it's healthy school mealing, whatever it might be, it may be important, but you always seem to add something else to the curriculum. Shouldn't you let the schools decide?
I don't think anybody sees citizenship as a fad. I think they see it as an essential part of what they're doing in allowing their young people to develop. And I just think this has been such an important reform, and the way schools have embraced it and parents and communities have embraced it has been fantastic. As I say, not just the lesson, but the way in which schools, through all of their activity, do their work, I think is a great credit to all of them. And it's a fantastically important part of what schools do.
OK, thank you. And we've also been asking for questions from the Chalkface. Our reporter Laura Turner has been to speak to staff at the City Academy in North London. Here are their questions for Vernon Coker.
My name's Dion White. I am a humanities teacher and literacy coordinator. My question is to Vernon Coker. I would like to know, how will you ensure that every primary school child leaves primary school confident in their literacy and numeracy? And how are you going to measure that?
Hello, my name's Gareth Lewis. I'm a teacher of English and Media Studies. I'm also a staff governor. My question for Vernon Coker is, what can your party do to ensure equality of opportunity for all children as they begin their lives at the most important time of their lives as they go through their education?
Hello, my name's Faye Benson, I'm an NQT. I would like to ask Vernon Coker about your pledge to guarantee to provide 300,000 pupils one-to-one tuition in English and maths. Where are you going to get the resources from in order to do this?
So Vernon, 3 questions there. Let's take them in order. The first question about how you're going to guarantee every child leaves confident in their literacy and how you're going to measure that.
Well, I think it's building on the work that's been done in our primary schools, which has seen significant improvements in numeracy and literacy, and to carry on with that work. People will also know, teachers will also know that from 2011, the national strategies will come to an end. That money will be devolved for schools for them to look at how they carry forward their numeracy and literacy work as well as other work. I think alongside that, and we'll come to it in one of the later questions, is also the pledge that we've made to provide that tuition, that catch-up tuition to young people who fall behind. We know the levels that we're expecting our children to reach at certain times, and the one-to-one tuition and small group work and the money that we're making available to that, alongside all of the other things,
What's
will
the
make a
key
difference.
measure, though? Is it the teacher's assessment, or is it how they're doing in the Key Stage 2 SATs?
Well, I think it's a balance between those things. I mean, teacher assessment is important, and testing is one of the mechanisms we use. If we were to move away from testing, I mean, one of the issues would be how then, I mean, I'm sure, because it's happened at Key Stage 3, is that we've taken away the Key Stage 3 SAT. One of the issues that now has arisen is the increased workload for teachers alongside teacher assessment. So, as always with these things, it's a balance, but certainly in terms of measuring it, it's important to know what progress a child is making, and there's changes already happening with teacher assessment of pupil progress, all of those sorts of measures being used at the moment, and the personalisation of learning. Okay. The important thing is each and every one of us has a focus on numeracy and literacy, and it's how best we support our schools to deliver that.
The second question was about equality of opportunity. Now we know 2 other parties are talking about a pupil premium to try and bridge that gap between the better off and the least well off. What about yourselves?
Well, the pupil premium, the local pupil premium, be something obviously, and money for deprivation will also support. I think one of the important things is that money for deprivation that's provided, we need to make sure that all that money arrives at schools to work with their young people. But I think it's broader than just resources for schools, important as that is. It's also the work. If you're talking about equality of opportunity, it's what happens with families before the young people reach school, the 0 to 3, the nursery provision, the Sure Start, the children's centres, how we support schools to work with families through extended services. All of those sorts of things are crucial. The context in which a school works is fundamental in trying to deal with some of those issues, as well as what happens in the school.
But they haven't closed the gap so far, have they?
Well, there's been, if you look at the schools with the largest numbers of pupils on free school meals, they're the fastest improving schools in the country. But of course, what the issue for all of us, and again, including the panel and myself and those watching, is we're all impatient. You know, none of us wants a child not to achieve what they should.
OK, well, let's come on to that
last
last
bit. Is recognising progress where it occurs.
And associated to that is your one-to-one tuition, but as our questioner says, how on earth are you going to fund that 300,000 pupils getting one-to-one tuition?
Well, we funded it this year and last year. I mean, this year is 150 million, next year is 300. So it's 450 million pounds worth of commitment that we've made in the current spending round.
And you can guarantee that will carry on even in the tough circumstances ahead.
That's there. That we've spent this money this year, and the 300 million next year is available. And I won't make the obvious point, but the obvious political point. All I'm saying, from our perspective, it's there this year and there next year.
Well, we'll remember that. Thank you. Let's go back to our panel. Catherine.
Vernon, the Labour Party reforms have been criticised as being very well intentioned but prone to get bogged down in dogma and vested interest. How will you guarantee that Labour will focus on the issues, and how will you, in particular, raise awareness of vocational education, the status of vocational education, and in particular the diplomas, and how are you going to guarantee the status of these qualifications?
Well, I think it's a really important question. Look, I think one of the things we have to do is to be confident as a government in the importance of practical stroke vocational qualifications. I think the diplomas are a major step forward. And I think one of the things that we also have to say is, look, what is one of the issues that's bedeviled our education system? It's been the academic vocational divide, the so-called belief that practical and vocational qualifications are somehow second rate. That isn't the case. We need to see them set alongside the academic qualifications and the status to both of them highlighted.
Are you happy as a head that the diplomas are going to work?
The diplomas problem, there's some very good work done in diploma work in the courses. Yeah. What has happened in schools is that this collaboration model where you have to send children around 3 or 4 institutions to achieve. We don't own the quality of education, and therefore we're very wary about allowing students to go around other institutions.
So how do you deal with that, this wariness of pupils moving around different colleges and schools because they don't feel they own them anymore?
Well, I think it's also the practical difficulty of people moving between sites as well. So I think the way you deal with that is to listen to what head teachers say. Because what people say is, look, we're not against the diploma. The diploma in vocational education is a very important reform and a very important development. The crucial thing is, how do you practically make that work for schools? And the collaboration model is one, but clearly there are issues that have arisen around that. We need to listen to what head teachers are saying and look to refine it to see how we can make that work in a practical and real way.
I need to bring in Steve now.
Okay. League tables do nothing but add pressure on teachers, and parents, it's been reported, suggest that they're not influenced by schools' positions in league tables when choosing schools. Why then do we persist with such an activity?
Well, I think league tables have got us to the point where we are at the moment, where we've tried to let parents know how a particular school is done and how different schools look compared to each other. But I think what we have done, Steve, is we've said, look, it does league tables, which give us the academic attainment or the raw attainment of a school, tell us everything that we want to know. And what we've said is the report card, which we're piloting now from September 2009 for 2 years, will include not only data on raw attainment, it'll include achievement, which is attainment, plus the progress that's made, because I think people want to know what's the trajectory.
You're sort of hinting that the report card might replace league tables. You never quite said that they would replace them.
We've said they'll supersede it. I mean, what we say is they'll supersede.
Does that mean replace?
Well, these are discussions that are taking place. But I mean, look, one of the things, Mike, that we've all said is that I know from teachers I know when they've said, don't just judge a school on its raw attainment, important as that is. And let me just say this so that I'm clear. We all know that academic achievement is really, really important. But alongside that, we want to know things like narrowing the gap, what the parents' perception of a school is, and also the achievement, which is the attainment plus progress. And importantly, also things like pupil well-being. Now, I think that should be on a report card. Some people say this is not what schools are about. But I know that when parents talk to me about schools, as well as the academic achievement, they also want to know things like,
so
will my
Steve,
child...
report card, is that better than league tables?
Yeah, that will show kind of the sporting success of a school. You talked about citizenship. That will show the extra things that a school is capable of. And when we teach children in science, when they want to carry out a fair test, to change one variable only. The problem with SATs and league tables is that we're changing the children each year and we're changing the test. That's 2 variables. Yeah.
Okay, so just briefly for the moment, it's still report card
and league tables
at the moment.
It's the report card which is in development. The report card which is in development tries to capture more of what a school is about over and above just the raw academic achievement.
Okay, Ronan. In many other European countries, children start school later than we do in our country, and yet they progress well. Is there anything we can learn from this?
Yeah, 6 or 7 in some countries.
Well, 6 or 7. Although if you actually look at what they do in their preschool, in the nursery, it's actually very similar to what happens with our foundation and infants. Although they'll formally say we don't start education until 6 or 7. I think there's a balance to be struck, and I think that was some of the discussions that have taken place recently in the implementation of the Rose Review, where we're saying children could start at 4. I think the important thing is to say is how are children taught? I mean, I'm not a primary school teacher, but when you go and speak to teachers there, it's the balance between structured learning and play and enjoyment. And I think it's getting that balance right. And if you ask me what we should learn sometimes or think about, and indeed what government should think about, is how we get that balance right so that children can have fun and can play and can learn through fun and play as well as structured learning. That happens in many schools, but I think as a government we need to reflect on how we ensure that happens, and we support that as much as we can as well.
Spiros.
Vernon, education is so central to the well-being of any society that inevitably all politicians want to get their hands on it, and often it just ends up being a political football just to simply score points, and often also the person who loses out is the child. Will your party ever have the courage to actually take education out of the political arena so that it's actually run by the professionals for the best for the whole child?
So hand over power to the professionals.
Well, I think two things. Or a couple of things. One is I think it's absolutely, education shouldn't be a political football where people score political points off each other. And secondly, we clearly should trust the professionals and the head teachers and the governors and those who run schools. But I think notwithstanding that, there are real differences between between the parties and indeed often out there in the community about how schools should be run. For example, if I just give a couple of examples, I don't think I should be in a situation where I could hand over and expect the extension of grammar schools, which I don't support. But if you had somebody who said, I think I should be able to argue against grammar schools. I don't believe in every school becoming an academy in the secondary system or in the primary system. So I think there are political differences between the parties.
Vernon Coker, thank you very much, and thank you also to all of our panel. I'm afraid we've run out of time now, but don't forget you can keep up to date with the latest education news on the Teachers TV News website. That's at teachers.tv/news. Or join the election debate on Twitter. Just search for Teachers TV News. If you've missed the other programmes in this series, they'll be repeated on Teachers TV and available to watch on our website. Join us again for Election 2010, Testing the Parties.